Chapter 38 of North Pole Voyages by Zachariah A. Mudge. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 38 Cunning Hunters. Our sketch of Mr. Hall's Eskimo life brings us to the early summer of 1861. He had made many excursions in and about Frobisher and Field Bays, which we have not noted. Their results were mainly valuable for the relics obtained of the visits here of the famous old explorer Frobisher nearly 300 years ago. There were, too, he ascertained, traditions among the natives of these visits, as well as that of Parry nearly 50 years before, which so well accorded with the known facts as to show the reliability of such traditions. An incident occurred during one of these excursions which illustrates the deceitful effect of refraction in the northern atmosphere. He landed on a headland in Frobisher Bay and secured an enchanting view of land and sea. Points of historic interest were under his eye, and nature was clothed with a wild Arctic beauty. But an object of still more thrilling interest comes in view: a steamer. Yes, there is her hull and smoke pipe, all very unmistakable. See, she tacks, now this way, then that, working her way, no doubt, towards the land on which he stands. Mr. Hall ran to the camp and told the good news to Cujesi and Eberbing, his companions. His mind was fairly bewitched with visions of news from civilization, from his country, and perhaps letters from his dear ones of the family circle. Each shouldered his loaded gun and walked round to the point on the shore towards which the steamer was coming. They would make a loud report with their guns, and compel those on board to notice them. When they reached the spot, there was no steamer. The Eskimo looked with blank amazement and turned inquiringly towards Mr. Hall. Had she sailed away? No, that was impossible. It was only that rock yonder half buried in snow. There, it does even now look like a steamer. Wait a while. No, it no more looks like a steamer than it looks like a cow. It is a cruel cell. It will be recollected that the George Henry had made her winter quarters in a little nook in Field Bay, called Rescue Harbor. From his home in her cabin Mr. Hall was going forth on his explorations. But the whalers had made a whaling depot on a cape of Frobisher Bay, which commanded a view of its waters and of the waters of Davis Strait. Here they watched for whales, or made excursions after them. To this depot Mr. Hall made an excursion with Cujesi about the middle of June. On their way over the ice, Cujesi gave illustrations of two Eskimo methods of taking seal that were very peculiar. The dogs scented the seal and broke into a furious run, making the sledge spin over the ice. Soon Cujesi perceived him lying with his head near his hole. On the instant the dogs and their drivers set up a vociferous, startling yell. The seal lifted up his head, frightened almost out of his wits, so that the dogs were within a few rods of him before he so far recovered his senses as to plunge into his hole and escape. Cujesi said that only young seals are so caught. In this case fright had nearly cost the poor seal his life. At another time Cujesi saw a seal sunning himself, and lying, as is their habit, near his hole. The hunter stopped the sledge, took his gun, and keeping back the dogs, lay down and drew himself along upon his breast, making at the same time a peculiar plaintive sound, varied in intonation. To this seal talk, as the Eskimo term it, the animal listens, and is charmed into a pleasant persuasion that some loving friend is near. He looks, listens, and then lays his head languidly upon the ice. So the wily hunter approaches within easy range, the rifle cracks, and the fatal ball goes through the vitals of the confiding seal. Thus seals, like men, sometimes die of alarm, and are sometimes taken in the flatterer's snare. Mr. Hall found the whale depot a busy place. Numerous tents of the white men and Eskimo were grouped together, in the midst of which, on a substantial flagstaff, the stars and stripes were waving. The Eskimo and dogs proclaimed their welcome in their peculiar way, and the officers and crew made the visitor feel at home. The question soon discussed concerned a boat for Mr. Hall's journey to King William's Land. Captain Buddington said seriously that the question had been much on his mind, and had been anxiously considered, and his painful conclusion was that he had no whaleboat adequate for the undertaking. The boat made on purpose for that service, which had been lost when the Rescue was wrecked, was the only one brought into those waters which could convey him safely. To go in any other would be to throw away his life. So Mr. Hall said heroically, "I will make the best of my stay here, in explorations and study of the Eskimo traits and language. Do you return to the States, get another suitable boat, and God willing, I will yet go to King William's Land." Touching incidents of Inuit life were constantly passing before Mr. Hall. Here is one. There was a young man, Itu, about 25 years of age, whom our old acquaintances Ugarng had taken into his favor. Itu had the misfortune to be born spotted all over his body, precisely like the snow-white and black spotting of the skin of one species of seal. His heathen parents seemed on this account to have loathed their child, for, after enduring his presence a few years in the family, the father carried him to an unfrequented barren island to die. But God, who cared for the child Ishmael and the little Moses, watched over Itu. He caught the sea birds which flocked to the land with his hands, an extraordinary exploit. The summer thus passed, and winter came, and the boy yet lived. It so happened, or shall we not the rather say, God so ordered, that a kayak of natives rowed that way. They were surprised when they saw a boy alone on the drear island, and the child was frightened at their presence. But when they made friendly signs, he rushed into their arms. The boy returned to his people, but being shunned and slighted, he became discouraged and indolent. Such was his situation when Ugarng took him into his family. One day Mr. Hall entered the tent of Eberbing and found there a girl 13 years of age, Ukudlir, weeping as though her heart would break. She also was of Ugarng's family, but had been staying with the kind Tukulito, wife of Eberbing. Her trouble was that Ugarng was coming to take her away and make her the wife of Itu. Marry a seal-spotted man! The thought was awful. Then she was so young. Eberbing took with him a friend, and called upon Itu and told him the dislike felt toward him of the girl. Poor Itu! Then Tukulito agreed with Ugarng to take charge of Udukler, so the marriage was prevented. Marriage contracts among the Eskimo are made by the parents or other friends, often in the childhood of the parties. Those immediately concerned seldom have anything to do or say in the matter. Among the Eskimo of Whale Sound, the proposed bridegroom was sometimes required to be able to carry off to his igloo, in spite of herself, his intended bride. The resistance in such cases on the part of the woman is supposed to depend upon circumstances. There is no marriage ceremony. In these Eskimo communities, the two great events, marriage and death, transpire without special note. Among the natives of the region we are now visiting, the newborn child generally first sees the light alone with its mother, and in an igloo built expressly for her. Late in July the ice broke up and liberated the George Henry from her icy prison. The sailors returned on board, and she sailed away on a whaling cruise. Mr. Hall was left alone with his Inuit friends. He had planned a voyage of exploration in his whaleboat with a crew of them, to be absent about 2 months. On his return, if he found the whalers in those regions, he would go to the States in one of them. If not, he would remain in Eskimo life until their return. Eberbing and Tukulito were of course to be of his party, but Eberbing was taken seriously sick and so was prevented from accompanying him, much to his regret. His crew, as finally selected, were Kujesi and wife, Charlie, his Eskimo name is too long to write, and his wife, Kudlu, and a widow, Suji, remarkable for her great size and strength, weighing 200. The party were off the 9th of August. They passed through Lupton Channel, a narrow run of water connecting Field Bay with Frobisher Bay. A white whale preceded them, leisurely keeping the lead, as if conscious that there were no harpoons in the boat. Perhaps he assumed his safety from the presence of the woman. The seafowl were abundant. The Eskimo, to save ammunition, adopted one of their own amusing yet cruel ways of capturing them. They rowed softly and swiftly to a cluster of them in the water. Just as the birds were about to fly, the whole crew set up a most terrific yell, at the same time stamping and throwing their arms about with wild gesticulations. Down go the frightened birds, diving instead of flying to escape the enemy. The crew now seize their oars, and the steerer guides the boat by the disturbed surface of the water to the spot where they come up. The moment they show their heads, the uproar is renewed. Down go the birds again without taking breath. This course, though exciting sport to the hunters, is soon death to the poor birds, which, exhausted and finally drowned, are picked from the surface of the water. One of the ducks taken in this way was a mother with a fledgling. As the parent gasped in its dying agony, the child would put its little bill in her mouth for food, and then nestle down under her for protection. The explorers, having entered Frobisher Bay, sailed west along its northern shore. They camped at night on the land and made slow progress by day. The Eskimo were in no hurry, while Mr. Hall would make good time to the extreme west of the bay and survey that line of coast, as the waters had hitherto been deemed straight. But his free and easy companions were more disposed to have a good time than to add to geographical knowledge. At one time Kojesi, taking up Mr. Hall's glass, saw a bear some miles away on an island. Fresh duck was plenty on board, and a chase after Ninu at the expense of time was unnecessary. But it would be fun, that settled the matter. Away sped the rickety old whaleboat, impelled by strong hands. Bruin soon snuffed the strangers, stood and looked, then comprehending the danger, turned and ran over to the other side of the island. Soon the boat was in sight of him, and he plunged into the water. The Eskimo now adopted a part of the game they had played so successfully on the ducks. They occasionally made a sudden and deafening uproar. Ninu would stop and turn round to see what was the matter, and so time was gained by his pursuers. But he made good speed for the mainland, and after a while began so far to comprehend the situation that no noise arrested his course. On he went for dear life. The balls soon reached him and dyed his coat in crimson, yet he halted not until one struck his head. This enraged him. He deemed the play decidedly foul. He turned, showed his teeth, and this brought the boat to a standstill. The hunters did not care for a hand-to-paw or a fight. The rifle settled the unequal conflict, and Ninu's body was towed ashore. The bladder of the bear was inflated, and with some other charms put on a staff to be elevated on the top of the tupig when the party encamped, and in the bow of the boat when sailing. This ensured good luck according to Eskimo notions. The explorers were, while in camp at one time, in want of oil for their lamp. Kudlu found some strips of sea blubber and carried it to Suji, who was in tuktu, that is, in bed. She sat up, rested upon her elbows, put a dish before her, took the blubber, bit off pieces, chewed it, and sucked the oil out, and then spurted it out into the dish. In this way she milled oil enough to fill 2 large lamps. This done, she lay down again and slept, with unwashed hands and face. There were no white sheets to be soiled. End of chapter 38.